Last week, we looked into Exodus 7, where the showdown between God and Pharaoh kicked off. Recall, God makes Moses like a god to Pharaoh. That was in Exodus 7:1. And Aaron turns his staff into a snake, and Pharaoh's magicians copy it. But God's power wins when the Nile turns into blood in Exodus 7:20. The fish die, the river stinks, yet Pharaoh's heart stays hard. But the battle has just begun. So today, let's dig into chapter 8. I'm calling this one, What's the Deal with Frogs, Flies, and Foolish Pride Taking Over Egypt? Well, Exodus 8 is where the plagues really hop to life, literally. The chapter opens with God sending Moses back to Pharaoh with the same demand. This is what the Lord says, let my people go that they may worship me. Now that's in Exodus 8:2. If you refuse to let them go, I will send a plague of frogs onto your whole country. The Nile will teem with frogs. They'll come up into your palace and into your bedroom and onto your bed, into the houses of your officials and onto your people and into your ovens and your kneading troughs. Now, that sounds like a nightmare. Frogs in your bed, frogs in your bread, frogs in the oven. They're there by the dozen. Okay, that's enough of that. Imagine that. Pharaoh rolls over in the middle of the night, and instead of a pillow, he's got a pile of croaking frogs in his bed. Egypt becomes one giant amphibian infestation. Now, finally, Pharaoh's had enough, and he tells Moses, pray to the Lord to take the frogs away from me and my people, and I will let your people go to offer sacrifice. That's in Exodus 8:8. Moses asks when he'd like that to happen, and Pharaoh, surprisingly, he says tomorrow. In Exodus 8:10, we read, tomorrow, Pharaoh said. Moses replied, it will be as you say, so that you may know there is no one like the Lord our God. Well, you'd think Pharaoh would say right now, but maybe he needed one more night with his frogs. I don't know. Egypt goes from croaking chaos to stinking corpses overnight, but as soon as there's relief, you guessed it, Pharaoh hardened his heart and would not listen. Exodus 8:15. It's a classic Pharaoh move. Ha ha ha, my fingers are crossed behind my back. So that brings on round 2. Next, Aaron strikes the dust of the ground, and all the dust throughout the land of Egypt becomes gnats. That's in Exodus 8:17. Now you know how that feels when a gnat flies up your nose, right? Now imagine that times 1,000,000. Now, Exodus 8:19 tells us, but when the magicians tried to produce gnats by their secret arts, they couldn't. Since the gnats were on the people and animals everywhere, the magicians said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. But Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he would not listen, just as the Lord had said. Even Egyptians' best are starting to realize this isn't a trick, it's divine power. But Pharaoh's pride still keeps him locked up tighter than his coin purse. Which brings us to round 3. God gives Pharaoh another chance. He says, if you do not let my people go, I will send swarms of flies on you and your officials. Now that's in Exodus 8:21. But here's where things shift just a little. God makes a distinction, but on that day I will deal differently with the land of Goshen, where my people live. No swarms of flies will be there. Exodus 8:22. So for the first time, Egypt suffers while Israel is spared. Well, the lesson's pretty clear. God says, my people are protected. Yours aren't. So the flies come, and Egypt is ruined. Pharaoh calls Moses again, trying to negotiate. He says, okay, you can worship God, but just do it here in Egypt. Well, Moses replies, no way, Jose. So Pharaoh relents temporarily. And Moses prays and the flies vanish. But surprise, surprise. So Pharaoh hardened his heart again, and he would not let the people go. That's twice now. Now, I guess that would make him a dirty double-crosser. Interesting story, right? But how does that apply to us, right here, right now? Well, let's start with this. Don't wait until tomorrow. Now, Pharaoh said tomorrow, when he could have asked for deliverance today. And how many of us live with one more night with the frogs? Whether it's sin, bitterness, or procrastination, why wait to obey God? Why wait to ask for his help and his support and his guidance? And then there's this, God's power has no equal. The magicians eventually said, "This is the finger of God." Now even the world's wisdom recognizes God's hand when he moves. But they deny it, they ignore it completely, or they completely change the story. Now we can also clearly see that God protects his people in the midst of judgment. While Egypt was swarmed with flies, well, Goshen stayed calm. When chaos in this world, God still knows how to keep his children under his care, safe and protected. But looky here, this is very important. Beware of the hardened heart. Pharaoh's heart kept stiffening after every act of mercy. Rebellion often grows stronger when grace is ignored. Recognize God's grace when you see it in your life. There's nothing that we can accomplish by ourselves. We need God's love, his support, and his guidance. Now in the end, Exodus 8, well, that reminds us that God's patience, well, it's incredible. His power, it's undeniable. And his purpose, unstoppable. Pharaoh might have had a crown, but Moses had a calling. And you know what? When you stand with God, no plague, no Pharaoh, no pile of frogs can stop his plan for your life. So if this touched you, share it with others, and especially your loved ones. Till next week, may God bless you and keep you safe.